The kitchen smelled of burnt toast and regret. I stood at the counter watching the coffee maker sputter its last drops when she walked in with that smile, the one I hadn't seen in over a year, the one that used to make my heart race, but now only made me cautious. "We need to talk," she said, her voice trembling with what I assumed was nervousness. I turned to face her, noting the way she clutched something in her hands, a small white stick. My stomach tightened before my brain could catch up. "I'm pregnant," she announced, her eyes welling with tears. "We're going to have a baby. You're going to be a father again." The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. I stood there, coffee mug halfway to my lips, processing what she just said. The logical part of my brain began calculating immediately. Our daughter was 12 now. The last time we'd been intimate was, I counted backward, 4 months. No, closer to 5. "Say something," she pleaded, stepping closer. "Aren't you happy? I know we've had our problems, but this could be a new start for us, a chance to remember why we fell in love." I set the mug down carefully, buying myself time. Her perfume reached me, something new, expensive. When had she started wearing that? I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but she'd always been good at this. 16 years of marriage had taught me that much. "This is unexpected," I managed, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. I know," she gushed, moving closer still. I couldn't believe it either. I took 3 tests, all positive. I have a doctor's appointment next week to confirm everything. She reached for my hand, and I let her take it, feeling the coolness of her fingers against mine. When was the last time we'd held hands? When was the last time she'd looked at me with anything other than irritation or indifference? "I've already started thinking about names," she continued, her words tumbling out faster now. "And we'll need to convert the guest room into a nursery. Oh, and I called my mother already. She's thrilled. She always wanted us to have another baby." Of course, she'd called her mother first, not discussed it with me privately, not considered how I might feel, but jumped straight to broadcasting news that couldn't possibly be true. Unless. "How far along are you?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "The test doesn't say exactly, but based on my cycle, probably 6 or 7 weeks. 6 or 7 weeks. I did the math again, carefully. We'd had that argument about her spending in early May. She'd slept in the guest room for a week. Then there was her sister's wedding in June, where she'd barely spoken to me. July had been worse. She joined that new gym and suddenly had evening plans 3 times a week. It was now late August. 6 or 7 weeks would put conception in early to mid-July. "Are you sure about the timing?" I asked carefully. Something flickered across her face. Annoyance, maybe. Or was it fear? It disappeared so quickly I might have imagined it. "Of course I'm sure," she snapped, pulling her hand away. "Why would you even ask that?" "Just trying to understand," I said, raising my hands in mock surrender. "This is a lot to take in." Her expression softened immediately, as if she'd remembered her script. "I know, honey, I'm sorry. I'm just emotional right now. Hormones, you know." Hormones, right. The perfect excuse for every mood swing, every inconsistency. "We should celebrate," she said, brightening artificially. "Maybe go out to dinner tonight? That Italian place you like." The Italian place I liked? The one we hadn't been to in 2 years because she said it was too expensive. Too far, too everything. "Sure," I agreed, watching her face light up with what looked like genuine relief. "Let me just finish getting ready for work." Work can wait, can't it? This is important. "I have a meeting I can't miss," I lied smoothly. "But tonight, definitely, we'll celebrate properly." She seemed satisfied with that, kissing my cheek before floating out of the kitchen, already on her phone, probably texting more people about the miracle baby. I stood there in the silence she left behind, my coffee growing cold, and began planning my next move. The office felt like sanctuary that morning. I closed my door, ignored my emails, and pulled out my phone with hands that barely shook. 20 years in corporate law had taught me how to stay calm under pressure, how to gather evidence without showing my hand. I'd need every bit of that training now. I started with our phone records. We'd been on a family plan for years, and I'd always had access to the account. She knew that, but people get careless when they think they're smarter than everyone else. I logged into the carrier's website and pulled up the last 6 months of activity. The patterns jumped out immediately. Multiple calls to the same unknown number, mostly during the day when I was at work. Text messages, hundreds of them, to that same number. They'd started in April, increased in May, and became almost constant by June. Then something interesting. They dropped off significantly 3 weeks ago. I wrote down the number and ran it through a reverse lookup. Nothing. Probably a burner phone or someone smart enough to keep their number unlisted. But it didn't matter. The pattern told me everything I needed to know. Next, I checked our credit card statements. She had her own card on our joint account, and I'd stopped scrutinizing the charges months ago when every question led to an argument. Now, I wished I'd paid more attention. There were charges at restaurants I'd never been to, always for 2 meals. A hotel charge from July 14th, while I'd been on that conference trip to Seattle. She'd said she was staying with her sister that weekend. Movie tickets bought in pairs. Wine, always wine, from that upscale shop downtown. But the most damning evidence was from a boutique she'd never shopped at before. 3 purchases in the last 2 months, totaling over $2,000. Lingerie, according to the merchant code. I thought of her dresser drawer, the practical cotton underwear she'd worn for years. Where was this expensive lingerie? Certainly not in our bedroom. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking, and stared at the numbers on my screen. This wasn't just an affair. This was systematic deception playing out over months while I'd been too tired, too busy, too complacent to notice. My paralegal knocked on the door, breaking my concentration. "Your 10 o'clock is here. Give me 5 minutes," I called back. I needed to think strategically. Confronting her now would be emotionally satisfying, but legally stupid. We lived in a state where adultery still mattered in divorce proceedings, especially when it came to asset division. But more than that, I needed absolute proof that the child wasn't mine. Without that, any accusations would look like paranoid jealousy. I pulled up a private browsing window and researched paternity testing. There were prenatal options now, non-invasive ones that just required a blood sample from the mother. They could be done as early as 7 weeks, but getting her to agree to that would raise immediate suspicions. No, I needed to wait until after the baby was born. That meant months of pretending, of playing along with her charade. Could I do that? Could I watch her belly grow, attend doctor's appointments, and prepare a nursery for a child that wasn't mine? My phone buzzed. A text from her. "Can't stop thinking about tonight. Should I wear the blue dress?" The blue dress. The one she bought last year and wore exactly once, claiming it made her look fat. I told her she looked beautiful, but she changed anyway. I typed back, "Perfect, 7 o'clock. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Make it 8 o'clock. I have a hair appointment at 5 o'clock. A hair appointment she hadn't mentioned this morning. I added it to the mental list of things that didn't add up. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings I barely remembered. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Who was he? How long had it really been going on? Did our daughter know? Sarah. God, I hadn't even thought about how this would affect Sarah. She was at that age where everything was already confusing and dramatic. What would it do to her to learn her mother had betrayed our family like this? At 3 o'clock, I called an old friend from law school who specialized in family law. We met for coffee at a place far from both our offices. "I need advice," I told him, stirring sugar into coffee I wouldn't drink. "Hypothetically." He smiled grimly. "They're always hypothetical until they're not. What's going on?" I laid it out for him, the pregnancy, the timeline, the evidence I'd found. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious. "Hypothetically," he said when I finished, "your friend should document everything. Phone records, credit card statements, any unusual behavior. But he should act normal, even supportive. Let her think he's bought the story completely." And the paternity test? After birth, definitely. During pregnancy, if he can manage it without tipping his hand. But that's tricky. The key is not to show any suspicion. Once she knows he knows, she'll lawyer up and start hiding assets. She wouldn't. "They always do," he said flatly. "I've seen this 100 times. The same person who promised to love and cherish you will clean out bank accounts and disappear jewelry you inherited from your grandmother. Protect yourself first, play nice second." We talked for another 20 minutes about logistics, about the kind of evidence that would hold up in court, about how to secure important documents without raising red flags. When I left the coffee shop, I felt steadier. I had a plan now. I would play along, document everything, and wait for my moment. She wanted me to believe in this fairy tale. Fine, I'd be the most supportive, expectant father in the world, right up until the moment I proved she was lying. The Italian restaurant was crowded, filled with a low murmur of conversation and the clinking of glasses. She'd worn the blue dress after all, and I had to admit she looked radiant. Pregnancy glow, people called it, though I suspected it had more to do with the satisfaction of thinking she'd gotten away with something. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass of sparkling water in a toast. I touched my wine glass to hers, smiling. To new beginnings. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was indeed a new beginning, just not the kind she imagined. Over the next weeks, I became the husband she'd always claimed to want. I came home earlier, helped more around the house, asked about her day with genuine seeming interest. I researched pregnancy symptoms and brought home ginger tea for her morning sickness. I suggested we take a weekend trip to the mountains, just the three of us, before the baby comes and everything changes. She seemed genuinely confused by the transformation at first, then pleased, then comfortable. That was what I was counting on. Comfort breeds carelessness. The phone calls to that unknown number had stopped completely. I noticed from the bills. Either she'd broken it off with him, or they'd gotten smarter about communication. I suspected the former. The pregnancy had probably complicated things. Maybe he'd wanted her to leave me, and she'd refused. Or maybe he'd panicked and run. Either way, the sudden silence told its own story. I'd hired a private investigator, a woman my family law friend recommended. She was worth every penny of her exorbitant fee. Within 2 weeks, she had a name and photos. His name was Jason Mercer, 32 years old, 9 years younger than my wife, 12 years younger than me. He worked as a personal trainer at the gym she joined in July. Of course he did. The photos showed them together at restaurants, walking through a park, his hand on the small of her back, in a way that spoke of intimacy and ownership. The investigator had even managed to get photos from inside a hotel room. I told her not to bother with that level of detail, that I didn't need to torture myself, but she'd insisted it might be necessary for court. I kept the envelope sealed. Some images, once seen, couldn't be unseen. The timeline matches your wife's pregnancy perfectly, the investigator said during our second meeting, sliding a comprehensive report across the table at the anonymous diner we'd chosen. Multiple encounters throughout June and July. Then, according to the gym schedule, he put in for a transfer to their California location. Left town 3 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? Right around when the phone calls stopped. So, he had run. Probably told her he wanted nothing to do with the baby, that she needed to pass it off as her husband's problem. There's something else, the investigator continued, pulling out another set of photos. She met with an attorney 4 months ago. Here's the building, the date stamp, and I got the name off the directory. Divorce attorney, pretty aggressive reputation. So she'd been planning her exit before the pregnancy complicated things. Had she intended to leave me for him? Or was this always about securing the best financial outcome, with the affair just being a bonus? Good work, I said, gathering the documents. Send me your final invoice. You want me to stop surveillance? For now. I'll reach out if I need anything else. At home, I played my role perfectly. I went to the first ultrasound appointment, holding her hand while the technician pointed out the tiny form on the screen. 8 weeks along, they said, right in the timeline she'd given me. I asked appropriate questions, took home the grainy photos, even suggested we share them with friends. Are you sure? She asked, seeming surprised. I thought you'd want to wait until after the first trimester. You know, in case something happens. Why wait? I said. I'm excited, aren't you? Something flickered in her eyes again, that same look from the kitchen. Of course I am. I just don't want to jinx anything. We told Sarah that evening over her favorite dinner. My daughter's reaction was hard to read. Surprise, certainly, and something that might have been concerned. Really? She said, looking between us. But you guys barely even talk to each other. Sarah, my wife said sharply. It's okay, I interrupted. She's not wrong. Your mother and I have been going through a rough patch, but this baby is a blessing, a chance for us to reconnect as a family. I watched my wife's face as I said it, saw the relief and something else, maybe guilt. It was so hard to tell anymore. We'd both become such good actors. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in my home office and reviewed everything again. The phone records, the credit card statements, the investigator's report, the photos I still couldn't bring myself to look at. I organized it all methodically, scanning documents into encrypted files, creating backups in 3 different locations. My friend had been right about one thing. She'd already seen a divorce attorney. That meant she had a head start on planning, but she'd made one critical mistake. She'd gotten pregnant. If she just asked for a divorce 4 months ago, she might have gotten a decent settlement. We'd have split assets roughly 50-50, figured out custody for Sarah, moved on with our lives. It would have hurt, but it would have been clean. Instead, she'd chosen deception. She'd chosen to pass another man's child off as mine, to lock me into another 18 years of financial obligation, to trap me in a marriage built on lies. The law was clear in our state. If you're married when a child is born, the husband is presumed to be the father unless proven otherwise. She was counting on me not questioning it, on my sense of responsibility, on my love for Sarah keeping me committed to the family unit. She'd miscalculated. I pulled up information on postnatal paternity testing again. Simple cheek swab results in 3 to 5 days. I could order the kit online right now, have it delivered to my office, and she'd never know until I was ready to show my hand. But timing was everything. Too soon, and she might have legal recourse. Too late, and I'd have wasted months of my life on an elaborate charade. I decided to wait until after the 2nd trimester, when the pregnancy was more established and she was fully invested in the narrative. Then, within days of the birth, I'd get my proof. 5 more months of pretending, 5 more months of sleeping next to someone who betrayed everything we'd built, 5 more months of being the supportive husband while building my case. I could do this. I'd done harder things. I closed the laptop and headed upstairs. She was already asleep, or pretending to be, curled on her side in that new silk nightgown I hadn't bought her. "Good night," I whispered to the darkness, knowing she couldn't hear me. "Enjoy it while it lasts." December brought early snow and the carefully orchestrated performance of holiday cheer. The house had never looked more festive or felt more hollow. She was 4 months along now, starting to show, and everyone we knew seemed thrilled about the miracle baby. "You two must be so excited," people would say at the holiday parties we attended, her hand resting on her small bump, my arm around her waist in a picture-perfect pose. "We're blessed," I'd respond, and she'd squeeze my hand as if we shared something precious. The only person who seemed to see through the facade was Sarah. My daughter had become quiet around the house, spending more time in her room, watching us with those sharp, assessing eyes that reminded me painfully of myself. One evening, while her mother was at another prenatal appointment, Sarah cornered me in the kitchen. "Dad," she said, her voice careful, "can I ask you something?" "Always, sweetheart." "Are you really happy about the baby?" I paused in the middle of loading the dishwasher, considering my answer. Sarah deserved some version of the truth, but she didn't need to carry the weight of what I knew, not yet. "It's complicated," I said finally, "but whatever happens, you're still my priority. That never changes." "Whatever happens," she repeated slowly. "That's a weird thing to say." "Is it?" She studied me for a long moment. "You know something. I can tell." "Sarah." "It's okay. You don't have to tell me. But Dad, whatever you're planning, I'm on your side." The tightness in my chest loosened just slightly. "Thank you, honey. That means everything." She hugged me then, quick and fierce, before disappearing back upstairs. In that moment, I knew that whatever else happened, I was doing this as much for her as for myself. She deserved to see that actions had consequences, that betrayal wasn't something you just accepted and moved past. The second ultrasound came in January. A boy, they told us. She cried happy tears. I held her and made appropriate noises while mentally calculating how this would affect child support payments when the truth came out. She wanted to start on the nursery immediately. I agreed, even volunteered to paint it myself. We chose a soft blue, bought furniture that had to be assembled, hung curtains covered in cartoon clouds. Every brushstroke felt like evidence I was creating, proof of my good faith efforts to accept this child as mine. Her family visited for a week, her mother fussing over her constantly, her father giving me those knowing looks that said, "Welcome to the chaos of another baby." I smiled and nodded and pretended their joy didn't make me sick, But it was the night after they left that everything nearly fell apart. I came home from work to find her crying in the nursery, sitting on the floor beneath the mobile we'd just hung. "Hey," I said, sitting down beside her. "What's wrong?" "I'm a terrible person," she said, the words coming out between sobs. My pulse quickened. Was this it? Was she finally going to confess? "Why would you say that?" "I haven't been a good wife to you for months, maybe longer, and you've been so wonderful since finding out about the baby, and I just feel like I don't deserve it." I put my arm around her shoulders, feeling her shake. "Everyone goes through rough patches in marriage. It's more than that." She pulled away, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I've been distant. I've been cruel sometimes, and you've just taken it all. And now you're being so supportive, and She trailed off, and I waited, barely breathing. "I need to be better," she finished. "I need to be the wife you deserve, the mother Sarah needs, the parent this baby needs." Not a confession, just guilt, probably prompted by hormones and the weight of maintaining her lies. I pulled her close again, making soothing sounds, while inside I felt nothing but cold calculation. "We all make mistakes," I said. "What matters is that we're here now, together, building something good." The irony of those words coming from me should have been funny. Instead, they just felt like another layer of deception in a house built on nothing but lies. February and March passed in a blur of preparation. The nursery was finished, the hospital bag was packed. We'd chosen a name, Daniel, after her grandfather. I wondered if she told the real father what she planned to call his son. The investigator sent me one final update in mid-March. Jason Mercer had gotten engaged to someone in California. The news came with photos of the happy couple. Him looking tan and carefree, completely unburdened by the consequences he'd left behind. I studied his face, this man who'd helped destroy my marriage without even having the courage to stick around. He looked young and stupid and completely unaware that his actions were about to catch up with him in the form of child support payments. Because that was going to be part of my plan, too. Once paternity was established, I'd make sure he paid his share. Not because I needed the money, but because everyone involved needed to face what they'd done. The due date was set for early April. As we moved into the final weeks, I ordered the paternity test kit and had it delivered to my office. It sat in my desk drawer, waiting, while I maintained the appearance of an excited father-to-be. "Are you scared?" she asked me one night, her hand on her swollen belly. About the birth, about everything changing again. "Terrified," I admitted, and that was the most honest thing I'd said to her in months. "Me too," she whispered. "But we'll get through it together, right?" "Right," I said, and kissed her forehead, and wondered if she could feel the lie in that simple gesture. 3 weeks until her due date. 3 weeks until I would know for certain, beyond any doubt, that everything I suspected was true. 3 weeks until I could finally stop pretending. I'd waited 6 months already. I could wait 3 more weeks. The finish line was in sight. The call came at 2:00 in the morning on April 7th, 3 days before her due date. I was awake anyway, lying in bed running through my plans for the 100th time when she grabbed my arm. "It's time," she said, her voice tight with pain. The drive to the hospital was surreal, her breathing through contractions, me checking mirrors and maintaining exactly the speed limit, both of us playing our roles one final time. In the delivery room, I held her hand, told her she was doing great, cut the cord when the moment came. Daniel arrived at 6:47 a.m., weighing 7 pounds 3 ounces. He had dark hair and, according to the nurses, excellent lungs. My wife cried with relief and exhaustion. I held the baby and felt nothing but the weight of what came next. "He's beautiful," she said, reaching for him. "He looks just like you did in your baby pictures." He didn't, but I didn't correct her. Let her have these last hours of believing her plan had worked. The paternity test kit was in my jacket pocket. I'd researched the procedure obsessively. All I needed was a simple cheek swab from the baby, easy enough to obtain during one of the dozens of times nurses and doctors were poking and prodding him. For myself, I'd already submitted my sample to the lab, expedited processing paid in full. I waited until she was asleep, recovering from the epidural and the trauma of birth. The baby was in the nursery under observation, standard procedure. I walked down there with my jacket, nodded to the nurse, and asked if I could have a moment alone with my son. "Of course," she said, smiling. "Just press the button if you need anything." The swab took 5 seconds. I sealed it in the provided container, labeled it carefully, and slipped it back into my pocket. By tomorrow afternoon, I'd have confirmation of what I already knew. I looked down at the sleeping infant, this tiny person who existed because of someone else's betrayal. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "None of this is your fault." The next 30 hours were perhaps the hardest of my entire life. Family visited, her parents, her sister, my own parents who'd driven in from 2 states away. Everyone cooed over the baby, congratulated us, talked about family resemblances that didn't exist. Sarah held her new brother with obvious reluctance, shooting me meaningful looks when her mother wasn't watching. I played the proud father flawlessly. I took photos, sent announcements, updated social media. I called my office and arranged for paternity leave. I did everything a man does when his child is born. The email from the lab came at 2:17 p.m. the following day while I was in the hospital cafeteria. I'd been staring at my phone for an hour, jumping every time it vibrated. The subject line read, "Test results available." I didn't open it immediately. Instead, I sat there holding my phone, feeling the weight of the moment. Once I opened that email, everything changed. There would be no going back, no pretending, no more waiting. I clicked the link. Probability of paternity, 0%. 3 words that confirmed everything. Not my child, not my responsibility, not my problem. I sat in that cafeteria for another 20 minutes, documenting everything. I forwarded the results to my lawyer, to my email backup accounts, to the encrypted cloud storage I'd set up months ago. Then I finished my coffee, stood up, and walked back to the maternity ward. She was awake, nursing the baby, her mother sitting beside the "There you are," she said, smiling. "We were wondering where you'd gone." "Can I talk to you privately?" I asked, my voice neutral. Her mother stood immediately. "I'll go get another coffee. Take your time." When we were alone, I closed the door and pulled a chair close to the bed. "I have something to show you," I said, pulling out my phone. "What is it? Is everything okay?" I turned the screen to water, the paternity results clearly visible. The color drained from her face. "What? What is this?" "I think you know what it is." "No." She shook her head, holding the baby tighter. "No, this is wrong. This has to be wrong. It's not wrong. I had them run it twice to be sure. Daniel isn't my son." "You're lying." Her voice rose. "You're making this up because you're angry about something, because you want to hurt me." "I'm not angry," I said, and realized it was true. I'd moved past anger months ago. Now I just felt tired. I'm just done. Done? What do you mean done? We have a son together. We have a family. We have a daughter together. This baby belongs to you and Jason Mercer. The name hit her like a physical blow. "How do you—" "I've known since the day you told me you were pregnant." The math didn't work. "We haven't been intimate since March of last year. That's not true." "We don't," I interrupted. "Please don't make this worse by lying more. I have phone records, credit card statements, photos. I have everything." She stared at me, the baby starting to fuss in her arms, sensing the tension. "You've known this whole time. 6 months. I played along because I needed to be sure, and because I needed documentation for the divorce." Divorce. She repeated the word like it was foreign. "You can't divorce me. I just had a baby. Our baby. Your baby. And yes, I can. I already filed the papers this morning. My lawyer will be serving you tomorrow. This is insane." She was crying now. "You're going to abandon me right after I gave birth. What kind of person does that? The kind whose wife had an affair and tried to pass off another man's child as his own," I said flatly. "Save the victim routine. It won't work." "What about Sarah? You're just going to destroy her family over this." Now I did feel a flash of anger. "I'm not the one who destroyed this family. You did that when you decided to sleep with your personal trainer. You did that when you plotted to trap me into raising his child. You destroyed this family, not me." The baby was crying in earnest now. She tried to soothe him, but her hands were shaking too badly. "He left, you know," I continued. "Jason. He moved to California 3 weeks after you told him you were pregnant. got engaged to someone else last month. He wanted nothing to do with this situation, so you decided to make it my problem instead. I never meant for... What? You never meant to get caught? You never meant for me to find out? Be specific. She couldn't answer. She just sat there crying, holding a baby that represented the end of everything she'd taken for granted. I'll be fair and in divorce, I said, standing up. You can have the house until it sells. I'll give you 6 months to figure out your living situation. Sarah will decide for herself where she wants to stay, but my lawyer thinks she'll choose me, and Daniel will get nothing from me. Not my name, not my money, not my time. But don't worry, I've already hired a lawyer to go after Jason for child support. He'll pay his share whether he wants to or not. You can't do this, she whispered. It's already done. My bags are packed. I'm staying at a hotel tonight and finding an apartment tomorrow. Sarah knows, and she's coming with me. You can tell your family whatever you want. I honestly don't care anymore. I walked to the door, then paused and looked back at her one last time. For what it's worth, I hope you figure things out. I hope you become the mother Daniel needs. But that journey doesn't include me. You made your choice 6 months ago. Now you get to live with it. I walked out of that hospital room and didn't look back. In the hallway, I passed her mother returning with coffee and kept walking. Let her deal with the aftermath. Let them all deal with it. Sarah was waiting in the parking lot, sitting in my car with her bags already packed. She'd known this was coming, had been ready for it. Is it done? She asked as I got in the driver's seat. It's done. Good. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Let's go home. I started the car, and we drove away from the hospital, from the lies, from the elaborate performance that had defined the last 6 months of my life. It would be messy. The divorce would be contentious despite my promises of fairness. Her family would hate me, would spread their version of events. Some people would believe I was the villain in this story, abandoning a woman and newborn baby. But I had the truth on my side, documented and irrefutable. And I had Sarah, who'd seen through the deception even before I confirmed it. And I had my dignity, which I'd somehow maintained even while playing along with the biggest lie of my life. 3 months later, the divorce was final. The house sold quickly, and I bought a smaller place closer to Sarah's school. She thrived without the constant tension that had filled our home. Her grades improving, her smile more genuine. I heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd moved in with her parents, that Jason had been ordered to pay child support after paternity test he tried to fight, that she'd had to get a job for the first time in 12 years. I felt nothing hearing these updates. Not satisfaction, not vindication, not even pity. Just the quiet relief of having closed a chapter that should have ended much sooner. On the day the divorce was finalized, Sarah and I went out for dinner at that Italian restaurant, the one I actually liked, not just the one I pretended to like for the sake of celebrating a lie. To new beginnings, I said, raising my glass. Sarah touched her glass to mine. To truth, she corrected, and to not letting people treat us like idiots. I smiled. To that. We ate good food, laughed at bad jokes, and drove home to our new life. Smaller, maybe, but built on something solid. The truth, I'd learned, might destroy everything, but lies destroy more.